Mist hung thick about her. The hunter fumbled over feet, roots, and bracken as she stumbled her way blindly over the grimy forest floor. The sun's light had disappeared behind a thick blanket of cloud, which cast the woods in a near total bleakness. The only markers the hunter could use to orient herself were the thicker absences which indicated where the trees lay in the dense and empty air. For hours now she'd been searching. The pages of notes which ought to help towards her quarry now sat useless in a ragged bag swinging limply at her side. Quitting had flitted through her mind more than once, but she was left unable to do anything but continue wandering aimlessly through the patches of trunks, in the hopes of simply falling out of the forest grasp, or finding a dry patch of ground which would sufficiently shelter her until morning. A steep incline in the lead sent the hunter to her knees. She could feel the painful swell of a tear as she leant her aching frame against the damp wall of earth, and began to claw her way up towards the mound's peak. A glitter met her at the summit. Only a few yards from where she lay, a soft glow illuminated the surroundings. Grinning, a swell of pleasure filled the hunter as she flew towards the patch of ground bathed in an ocean light. The little plant sat there imperiously, alone for a span of about a metre, as no other flower dared to grow in its shadow. It was delicate, several sharp petals glistening in a brilliant light. A soft portrait formed in her mind as she looked on. A finer gift she couldn't imagine. She tripped as she fell towards it. Brushing off her irritation, she realized that she'd stepped across the threshold of a small ring of stones encasing the little marvel, one of which, the cause of her fall, now sat askew from the perfect orientation of the others. She marvelled briefly at the idea that someone had obviously once prepared a bed for her glowing treasure. Turning back, she lowered herself beside it. With immense care and a deft touch, she pulled a glass jar from her pack. Hands dug into the cold soil and cupped around the flower's base, prizing it gently from the earth. For a moment, it gripped feebly to its home, before the hunter tugged it free and let it drop safely into the crystal jar, before urgently sealing the lid. With the new lantern now in her grip, the hunter guided her blistered feet through the now open trees. She cast a ghostly figure as she weaved back towards the burr she'd left earlier the same day. That evening, she was woken by broken glass and a pale presence. It must have been an immense shatter to have broken her slumber. The day's trials had left her energy enough only to see to the safety of the little plant in the greenhouse, before the beckoning call of her bed had proven too inviting. Now her figure remained in the confines of her covers. She waited, ice forming about her, until a shimmering light appeared at the cracks of her bedroom door. A darkness began to curdle within. A fear slithered across her feet as they fell to the floor, and the blankets were drawn back. The light brightened and bristled. Flaming tendrils leaked through the door's frame. A cocktail of logic and cowardice steered the hunter away from the door, as her frantic mind decided the best course of action would be to unlatch the window. Her queer abode was only 2 stories, and squat ones at that. The air was cooler and settled her a little as she dropped to the ground beside the house. She was surprised at how clearly the night appeared. A blue hue had draped over the garden. She was even more surprised to notice the small crowd of her neighbours, who stood nervously just beyond where she was crouched in her pyjamas. Her portrait stood before her, a troubled expression now discolouring the normally perfect form. A trembling smile matched their grim expressions as the hunter met their stares briefly, before turning to stroll around the corner of the house towards the front gate. She could hear the crunching patter and echoes and whispers which signified the small herd following behind. As the little crowd reached the front of the little house, a wave of murmuring flew about the scene, as vague wonder met with a deep, unsettling moan. Her cottage shimmered with a remarkable sapphire glare. Hundreds of bright petals fell from her broken windows, and weaved their way over the facade of the house, where they had begun to form a carpet over the limp grass. Her curiosity met with a profound resignation, as the shining beacon her house had become sent out a tune of creaks and groans. The whole thing gave the impression of sagging, as a lattice of cracking mortar began to emerge between the ancient bricks.